Hi, I'm Russ Movies, an independent filmmaker and actor in New York, and in between the chances I get to do my creative projects, I love to sit down and talk with other artists to see how it is they do what they do, how they take art and use their craft to reveal truth to an audience. So in this series of conversations, you'll meet some people you may recognize, some people you won't recognize, but they're all independent artists, and we'll get in depth in a long-form conversation to see how it is they do what they do. Welcome to Art, Craft, Truth. This conversation brings us to Linda Hanson. Linda is another great friend of mine. She's a playwright, an actress, a theater director, a theater historian, and she's a wonderful conversation to talk about the craft of writing and directing for the theater. And again, one of my favorite people in the world. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did with her. Linda Hanson. Linda, my friend. Linda, my friend. How are you?
I'm good.
This is so cool.
I'm actually on a high. You know, the whole pandemic thing. It's been a bit of a roller coaster.
So you're on a high?
I'm at a high energy, and I'm feeling good.
Really? Why?
You're gonna laugh.
No.
Okay, so I decided I needed a project every day to get me out of my pajamas and off the couch.
Right.
So I decided every day I was going to, take all the screens from one room, wash the windows inside and out, get rid of all the streaks. And streaks became very important for me during the virus.
Nice.
So my windows are sparkling clean for the first time in 10 years.
So that's the secret to...
But I got a lot of physical stuff, going.
You got endorphins going.
I've got endorphins going, and I'm also, on the elliptical 2 days a week. And while I'm on the elliptical, I'm taking a history of philosophy course on video.
So feeding the mind and the body at the same time.
And I just finished with the Greeks, and the Romans are next. The Greeks are tough, I have to tell you.
Well, you have always been a student of so many things, which we're going to get into. That's why you are fascinating. But yeah, so the secret of life is just clean your windows.
Clean your windows and listen to an extremely brilliant man talk about Greek philosophy.
Okay. Well, I can't go there, but we'll get as close as we can.
Okay.
I might get Italian.
Well, you're extremely brilliant.
Yeah.
So.
Well, okay. I'm not going to argue.
I mean,
with
not
you.
on Greek philosophy.
Far be it from me.
Yeah.
So you and I have known each other since 1993 or 4. We started. We were actors in the theater together.
Yes.
And we've worked together as actors. We've worked together collaborating, writing. Mm-hmm. And you're an actor and a playwright, and a screenwriter and a director of the theater. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start. I want this really to be, as I've told everybody, this is a conversation. So it's not an interview. You ask me questions. We'll talk about all our stuff. But I want to know a little bit about where you started with it. When you were a kid, is that what you wanted to do or no?
It's always what I wanted to do, but this is tough. It's always what I wanted to do. I can remember sitting, having a little stool and the chair in the living room and having a mirror and smoking pretzel sticks and, doing the makeup to go, shoot the movie kind of thing. So from like very young age, I've always been attracted to it. And then the show thing, it started almost with PBS. I remember seeing in junior high school a production. It was the original Robards production of The Iceman Comet that they filmed on PBS.
How old were you when you watched this?
I was in junior high.
All right, so 13 or 14?
Yeah.
I guess that's old enough to grasp what.
Well, I fell in love with Iceman at that time.
Right, good.
And it was a very young Robert Redford is playing parent, and of course Robards was, and it was Jose Quintero directed it for PBS. And I actually have the video. I bought it. So. But I just fell in love with theater. And the other thing that happened in the 7th grade, I was a terrible reader. I didn't actually read till the 2nd grade.
What?
I don't know. I just couldn't get it.
You don't have dyslexia or something like that?
No. I was put in a very advanced 1st grade for some ridiculous reason, and all these kids went on to win Westinghouse scholarships, and they were all reading, and I was way behind. So I didn't actually learn to read till the 2nd grade, and I was a terrible reader and very slow, and I didn't like it because it was hard. And when I was in the 7th grade, a friend of mine, actually Michael Wolf's sister-in-law,
Our friend Michael Wolf.
yeah, said to me, you know what you should do? You should read a play because there's only like 12 lines on a page and it goes very fast. She says, we just read this play called The Glass Menagerie.
Wow.
She said, you should read it. And I went to the library and I got The Glass Menagerie and I fell in love with Tennessee Williams, with the play, and with theater.
Isn't that amazing how the universe kind of does that?
Yeah.
This little sort of setback almost, and it turns you onto a whole life
so
of...
I went back and I read everything that Tennessee Williams wrote, much to my mother's consternation. Because he was considered pretty racy in the 19th century, the 20th century.
Right, yeah.
But, and then I went through all of Neil's, and I just fell in love with theater. I mean, it started with movies. I always loved movies. And then it progressed to theater. And then I saw my first Broadway show when I was like 14 or 15.
What was it?
It was Golden Boy with Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh.
And I was in love with him. And much to my father's consternation.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah. And, I went to see it, and then I just fell in love with it. I never had that experience of that kind of energy flowing, because there was always a screen. Even the Iceman, which I love. It was the first time I got it.
Right.
Oh my God, there's this energy that flows between...
Yeah, and I really, when we get into it, I want to expand on that, because I think one of the things I hope for this is there's a lot of people who don't understand what live theater is and what it feels like, and they're just not used to it now, especially a whole generation of people who've never been. So
so I think that kind of sealed it for me. And then my mother started taking me, because she knew I loved it. So she kind of, and I remember going to see a play called Love by Maurice Gogh. It was like in the 9th or 10th, ninth grade. And it was originally Alan Arkin and Jackson and Eli Wallach.
Okay.
But I was seeing a replacement cast. And I'm watching the guy in the Arkin role, which is a crazy, crazy role. The guy's like a total nut. And I can't take my eyes off this guy. And I'm like, holy cow, who is this guy? Comic, hysterically funny. About a year later, I'm watching the Johnny Carson show. And out comes this guy, and he says, I'm doing a movie with Mel Brooks called Springtime for Hitler. It was Gene Wilder.
Wow.
So I saw Gene Wilder before Springtime for Hitler.
Right.
But I remembered him. I remembered his name. And then, of course, he popped up in that.
Sure. So the theater infects you very early.
Yes.
When do you do your first? Was it in school? Did you ever get to do things in school, or when did you get on stage and try and do something?
I took acting classes in high school. We had a class.
That's okay.
We had the first class was called Dramatic Workshop, and the next one was called Production something. And this guy, Mr. Posner, and he was the cool teacher in
Of course he was.
High school. So I took the classes, with him. And I actually did a scene from Love with this guy who I wound up dating for a whole year, and because we were both interested in the theater.
Right.
So it started with that. I did the senior show, but I'm not much of a singer, as you know. So, and they were always musicals.
Always musicals. The same thing happened to me.
I was in the chorus, and I got myself through it. I wasn't, very good, but I got myself through it because singing was was never a great singer. Right.
And you went to, was it Queens College?
I went to Queens College, and that's when it really blew up.
Okay, there we go. Now we go.
Yeah.
So what happens in Queens College?
In Queens College, for the first year, I'm doing absolutely nothing. I'm scared, I'm intimidated, it's big, and this girl whose mother worked with my mother came in, she was a year behind me. And she came in, so my mother said, "Oh, you should look out for her," because we would have lunch together for a while. And she said to me, and she loves the theater. "Oh, you love the theater?" She knew I loved the theater. You have to audition. No, I don't want to audition. You have to audition. No, I don't want to audition. So I decided to go down to this play called Chicken Soup with Barley, the Arnold Wesker trilogy. Arnold Wesker was a British playwright who came up during the Angry Young Man period, the Osborne period. It's a terrible play. It's about English Jews.
I was going to say,
in communist English socialist Jews in the you know, in the 1950s. So I go and audition, and I read fairly well, and the director, Henry, who is still my friend, is talking to the stage manager, Gary, who is still my friend.
Right.
And Gary talks him out of casting me. He says, no, you should cast the other one. I don't think this one. And I went to high school with Gary. He knew me. So I don't get cast, and I'm kind of downtrodden. In the meantime, they cast Michael Wolff in a secondary minor role.
Michael Wolff is a friend of ours for
Yes,
people.
I know Michael for 50 years. I met him when I was 19.
Wow.
And this is how I met him.
Right.
So this other gentleman, Ira, who's also still a friend, was offered this role of these three friends.
Sure.
They're minor roles. But he had just graduated from the High School of Performing Arts and wasn't going to take a role that small. So Henry said, well, why don't I just cast that girl Linda and make it a woman? It could be a woman. So he cast me in this very small role. So the first time I legitimately walked on a stage in a straight play was with Michael Wolff.
And
when
you got out there in front of that audience for that whole experience, what was that like?
Well, I used to actually, literally, when I first started in college, I used to actually tremble. I mean, if I was smoking a cigarette, it was like this, you know. So, honestly, it was hard. It was very hard. But once I was in it, I was okay. It was just taking that first leap or off the edge.
Right.
And then kind of when I got used to leaping off the edge, that kind of went away.
Right.
And when I went back to it after all the years I was out of it,
Right.
that had disappeared.
Right.
I don't know why.
Oh,
But
just by the time you got back to it, you were cool.
I just disappeared. I didn't have this
Well,
trembling.
we're gonna skip around a little bit because I do want to get really into the craft of how we do what we do. So you have a whole life. You have a marriage and children. And
I
house
graduate and I put it behind me because
there's
I'm
no
not going to
theater,
do
there's
it.
nothing.
I'm not going to do it professionally.
Right.
And there's a lot of reasons why. You know, technically, I always say I think people like me who have always done it and non-professionally but really love it.
Yeah.
I think we're missing a chip in our head that says, I don't care if I'm homeless. I don't care if I have to eat ketchup for 6 months. I don't care. I think you have to have that in the beginning to try and pursue it professionally. I was also fighting very strict Italian parents.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I know people who have overcome that, so I don't want to blame them entirely.
No.
But that was a hard obstacle. I would have had to want it.
There's a whole lot of other things that play into it.
So I went, that was it, 20 years I stopped.
Wow, okay.
You know, and then Michael Wolff has always been in my life and very important. Michael Wolff called and said, I got a part in a community theater production of California Suite. We went to see it, and I turned to my husband and I said, I have to do this. He's having way too much fun without me.
Right.
And I started auditioning.
That's great. Yeah. And then we met in a small community theater production of which one was first? The Pickle Man one?
Crossing Delancey.
Crossing Delancey.
Yeah.
Right.
I was the shotgun.
Right.
Yeah.
We did that, and then we did. I get the two of them confused because they're similar to me in my head.
Then we
Beau
did
Jest
Beau
is the one
Jest
right
after. But I knew you ahead of time because what happened when I came in on Barefoot in the Park.
Right.
When we were up, you guys were rehearsing.
Okay.
For
whatever that was, the
Christie
thing?
play.
Murder at the Vicarage.
Murder at the Vicarage.
Right, yeah.
And you used to sit on the couch with Carol and Seif and run lines, and I used to take note of you, you know. Right. But I was, you know, in my thing,
sure.
You know. So you came in after we went out.
Right. And we hit it off right away as friends, and eventually did a whole bunch of things together.
Yeah.
We got to do Williams together. We got to do Cat on Hot Tin Roof. You were Big Mama to My Brick.
My all-time favorite roles ever.
It was a great
role for me. It
was
really
perfect for you, and it was a really fun production.
Yeah.
And the terrifying part for me, I don't know if you remember, was Bill, who was Big Daddy,
He never got his lines.
Had just, well, forget that. He had just come off of like heart surgery.
Yeah.
And we weren't sure if he was going to die.
Yeah.
And he had it was a 3-act thing. And that whole second act was me and him raging at
Yeah,
each other. And I'm like, please, God,
don't die.
please don't die on me. That's all I could think of the whole show.
Well, he obviously, was okay, because every time we were in the dressing room with the kids, he threatened to kill them if they didn't behave.
That's right.
I'm going to kill you, you little son of a bitch.
Right.
Those kids were so intimidated. And I was terrified of him on stage. I mean, he would yell at me, and I would literally
Oh, he's a
jump,
big man. He was a big, scary guy.
And he was scary on stage. In fact, I didn't let my daughter Lizzie what year was
I'm going to
she?
say that was 1994.
Okay, so she was born in 88.
95.
So she was 6.
Okay.
5 going on. And I said to Jeff, don't bring her, because I think the relationship is too abusive for her to look
That's
at.
right.
So I didn't let her come to see that.
We wouldn't let her go to see Streetcar either. That was not a good one to go see.
Yeah. And I was the lesbian nurse.
Yeah,
in
that's
that.
right. Yeah, exactly. So at what point, because we did a lot of things together, and I saw you do a lot of things, but always as an actor.
Yes.
And then around about 2000, right after September 11th, around that time, 2001, 2002, you had written a play, a full-length, a 3-character play, right? Called Lower Than the Angels.
No, first came Laundry.
Oh, that's right. The one-woman show. Right. Okay, so
show.
let's start with that then.
Yeah.
So first of all, where's the thought come that I'm going to write, number one,
Right.
and 2, I'm going to write for the theater?
The writing for the theater was very easy, because whenever I think of a story, I think of it in dialogue.
Okay,
I don't see
right.
pictures.
Right.
I don't see prose. I hear 2 people talking.
Gotcha.
Okay. So there was no other way for me to write. I don't even know how, to write any other way,
Right.
because I always hear dialogue. The impetus to write, I think it was always there, but never explored. And then one night, 2 friends of mine, and you know them, Howard and Linda Beckerman.
Yeah.
We went out to dinner. We all had kids the same age. Matthew was about 16 at the time. And Jeff and I and Linda and the other Linda and Howard went out to eat. And I started riffing on Matthew. I did about 10 minutes,
Little stand-up.
Yeah, just riffing about it, because he was 16. It was, And Howard says to me, you have to write this down. I said, what? It's nothing. What are you talking about? He says, I'm telling you, you have a 10-minute comedy routine here. I said, you're out of your mind. I said, I'm not, He called me the next day. He didn't leave me alone.
Ah, there's the key.
So I said, all right. I said, I'll make a deal with you. If I can write 10 minutes worth of stuff, I said, I'll come and I'll show it to you. And if I can't, you'll leave me alone. I got 20 minutes worth of material.
There you go.
I went to his house. He lived in Stony Brook. He worked for the ESL. He produced videos and audios. Sure. So he had a whole soundstage set up, and he always worked overnight at home. So I would come into the house at like 5, 6 o'clock. We would have a quick bite to eat. We would work through the night on the piece. Right. And then I would drive home in the morning.
All right, so I want to stop you here because... All right, so you write 10 minutes, turns into 20 minutes.
I worked 20 minutes.
But you hadn't written anything before.
Ever.
So the first time pen goes to paper and this stuff is... what's the process like then? Because I want to compare it to how things work for you now.
Okay. So
what did you do when you started writing?
The process was then... I just...
Speak out loud?
Like,
did you do your routine to yourself, or did you start writing? What did you do?
I started like almost recording what I had said at the restaurant.
Okay.
And I started, and then it just started to flow out of me. Right. And he said to me, "You have an HBO special here," So we had the piece. We worked on it. I went home, and then I started adding. So it was one for Matthew, one for me and my father, one about Jeff and I, and then The Road Not Taken, and then the final one about Elizabeth.
Right. So it's a one-woman show.
It's a one-woman show.
About a woman of a certain age and a certain path in life, and all of her.
Right. And the premise is, I wanted to be this bright star and illuminate and be famous, and I wound up in the basement doing laundry.
Right.
Was basically the premise, which you actually gave me.
Yeah, I don't. I remember we worked on it a little bit.
Because what happened was, I think I was calling it "What Am I Doing Here" or something.
Right.
And we were working on that first routine, and you said to me, you need a prop. You should be folding
action. Right.
You should be folding, and you said laundry.
Right.
It was like that's it.
Yeah.
It's laundry.
Right.
That's the whole thing. It's laundry.
Right.
So that's how it became laundry. Basically, it was
right.
It was you.
Well, it was we gave you a theme to
you
play
gave me
off of.
you gave me a thread, which was also a useful prop.
Yeah,
it worked. I worked out for that. So the laundry thing, we tried to get it going, and it never really did.
Yeah, right.
We
put it up a couple of different places.
We put it up a couple of different places. I never got to do the whole thing. I'm too old to do it now, but I would love to see somebody else do it.
Right.
I still think it's I have to.
Oh, it was great. It's
script it or change it a little.
What I always found about even that was your early thing. You have and I'm curious to know if you notice this, if you encourage it. You have sort of a Neil Simon-esque quality to the dialogue, a Woody Allen-esque. That whole those guys that vibe. You write that way.
But that's, because I think that way.
Right.
I think that's just
New York kind of
New York
snappy sensibility.
The second one came about more interestingly, and looking back at the four things I've written now, though I still love it because I have an affinity for the thematically, I think it's probably my weakest piece, which is Lower Than the Angels.
Right.
I don't think it's terrible.
Right.
I've seen worse, but. And that's because the whole idea of what constitutes a saint, what makes a person truly good, how do people judge that, has always been fascinating to me.
So let's just talk about that theme for a second. The plot of the play is it's basically a 3-character play.
Yeah.
2 priests and a woman and the woman's child who's in a vegetative state. Is supposedly performing miracles for the town. Right. The one priest, who's the local priest of the town, is sort of protecting that woman from any scrutiny, and the church sends in a Jesuit priest to scrutinize the whole situation, and of course all the themes of the physical, the divine, and all that stuff.
To me, the play, the reason I called it Lower Than the Angels is from a quote in the Bible that says something to the effect, "Though thou art made lower than the angels," meaning man is.
We're not quite.
Angel is all spiritual.
Right.
Animals are all carnal. Man is in between, and the crux of the piece is if you deny either half of those aspects of your humanity, you make yourself sick inside.
Right.
So if you deny your spirituality, or if you deny your carnality, which is the problem for the Jesuit, he's trying to shut down his physical self.
Right.
The other priest, who's technically the sinner, really has allowed both, and the woman, who's supposed to be the real sinner, is the only one who's completely integrated.
Right.
There's no difference for her between the carnal and the spiritual.
Right.
She's one entity.
Right. Yeah. And that's what, when at the time, we'll talk about the play, and we did a couple of stage readings of it.
Yes, we did.
We never actually got a full out production on stage,
Yeah.
which would be interesting to see, to try. But when it came time for me to do a film, I was going to take a shot at doing my first feature. Of course, I had never written anything, so I wasn't going to sit down and try and come up with an idea and write. So I thought we could adapt that into a screenplay, and we did. And that process was interesting.
Very interesting.
What was that like to take your stage play? As written and turn it into
Well, first of all, what I didn't know how to do at the time, which I think I know how to do better after, I've written 3, and the last one was very sparse on words. We never got to do anything with it, but I didn't know how to think in pictures. I was still thinking in words, basically. So your input was more about getting rid of some words and making images, which was difficult for me.
Yes.
I don't like giving up words. I don't think writers do, honestly. I don't think I'm different in that respect. I think it's hard for a writer to give up words, But screenplays are different. They really are. It's the last one I went into, I really made a conscious effort to go into it thinking of pictures. And how can I say this with a picture instead of with dialogue?
Right.
So that was a process that took a while.
Right.
But the first one was hard. It was very hard relinquishing it because I had a great affinity for the piece.
Right.
It was very hard to say, okay, it's the director's vision.
Right.
That's, I think, also much harder for a screenwriter than a playwright. I think a playwright has more power in the medium,
Absolutely.
in the theater, than a screenwriter has in that medium.
By leaps and bounds.
Leaps and bounds.
Far, yeah.
So if you're going to go into screenwriting, you have to understand it's the director's vision that you are
Serving. Right.
If you're a playwright, the director has to kind of serve you in the process.
Right.
So that was hard. That was a very, very hard thing to do.
But I wasn't too mean.
No, you weren't mean. It wasn't about being
Right,
mean.
no, it's
It was
just
about
you
you knowing the process better than me.
Right.
So it was hard, but there was a couple of things that kind of were fun. You made me write a scene for me, which was great.
How could you not be in it?
So, and that was great. And the whole process of watching what it takes to make a film,
Right.
The exhaustingly tedium of it all,
Yeah.
and the idea of how do actors keep that energy.
Right. And to do it with, as we do all the time, with no resources.
Yes, that's even on the fly, know. I mean, I remember one point we were looking for a place to film this one flashback scene that had to take place in an alley, and we were doing something else in a lawyer's office, and you're still pondering, where am I going to do this? And I turned around and went, there's an alley. It was like, oh, can we use this? And we did. Remember, we went in at night and we were skulking around, and it was, kind of weird,
All right, so the actual process of adapting something to the screen, when you're adding things, because we had to add backstory and other characters.
Right.
I mean, it was a 3-character play. We blew it up into everywhere.
Well, anything that's a monologue becomes, like, especially if the character is talking about what happened in the past.
Exposition of some kind.
It's got to be a flashback into something.
Right.
That much I knew. I realized we're going to have people sitting there talking all the time.
So was that fun?
That part was fun. The whole part, your backstory with the 2 old people,
Right.
That was great fun to write that.
I played one of the Jesuit in the film,
Jesuit,
and he had a sort of a sinful backstory. As he looked at it, anyway.
He just was not caring. He was a priest he was completely intellectual. He had no spirituality.
But then he had a little physical.
He had a physical thing with this woman who was very vulnerable at the time.
Yes.
And he's terribly guilty about it.
Yes.
Except that what he did was wonderful for her. He just couldn't recognize it because he had denied his carnal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that played into it, and I love that scene. It's my favorite scene.
Beautiful stuff. Yeah,
gorgeous.
You really
it's just gorgeous.
Wrote some great stuff for that.
Thank you. So that was really, that part of it I liked a lot. It was just like I said. Sometimes giving up the words is hard.
So, to this moment, you still would prefer writing for the stage. Yeah,
I think because, I'm more important if I write for the stage. I mean, I'm not going to lie about it.
Right.
I think that the playwright has more stature than the screenwriter. It's completely selfish. Completely selfish.
Right.
But I've embraced my selfishness as an actor.
That's right. So what you've had, we're going to talk about your directing in a second. So you've gotten to you've been a writer, you've been a director, and you've been an actor. And the disciplines of each of those particular crafts, what their responsibilities are. Talk about your personal feeling on those different things, how they interact with each other.
First, I just want to say, just as almost like a footnote, I think every actor, every director, and every writer should at least once do all 3.
Yes.
And I've said this, after I directed my first piece, I never, ever felt bad about not being cast again as an actor.
That's right.
Because you have no idea how these choices are made sometimes.
Exactly.
So you really want to feel comfortable with yourself as an actor, direct once, and then walk out of the audition happy with what you did. You should always satisfy yourself and be honest and true. But don't worry about what the director decides, because it has nothing to do with your ability.
Yeah, most of the time.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes, but most of the time, there's so many other considerations.
But when you're dealing with the 10 to 15% who show up at an audition who are talented, it's very arbitrary.
Yeah.
It's very arbitrary. So now the idea of, you said directing.
Yeah, no, the three different disciplines that you've been
Disciplines.
involved in
Yeah.
and how they interact with each other. What are your thoughts on that? What are the things you like about each
Yeah.
and how
It's
they...
a completely separate, different toolbox for all three.
Absolutely.
Okay. The playwriting is the most solitary of the three,
Okay.
and why it's the hardest for me to do. Because I basically,
Sure, it's
part
you
of
in a
what I
room.
do, yeah, you're in a room with a blank screen. It's terrifying.
Right. Yeah.
I love directing because, and this is, you kind of taught me this. When I first thought about, first of all, you kept saying to me, you should direct, you should direct, you should direct. And you gave me a really, really simple, probably the best advice any director who's starting out could get. And the problem is most directors working, and my experience is something that's skipped over. You said to me, your job is to tell the story and to get every element of the production connected
Right,
to
lined
the
up on the
story.
story, right.
It's or some people call it the spine. It's the story,
Right.
the lights, the set, the blocking, the individual scenes,
Right.
what the actors are doing. It's all about
Even the
telling
plot
the
is
plot.
not
The plot
necessary.
is not. It's the story.
Right.
And the example you've always given is, The Wizard of Oz is a story about a girl who gets hit in the head by a typhoon and has a dream and then wakes up. And the story is There's No Place Like Home.
Right. Exactly.
So before I start any directing project, I decide what's the story I'm going to tell. It's not necessarily the same for every director. You could be telling a different
Sure.
story. Once I decide what that story is, the other key element, which I don't see very often, is you need to tell the actors what the story is.
Right. Yeah. Let everybody know what
Let
page
everybody
we're on.
know what the story is and why sometimes you're going to tell them to do something because it has to serve the story.
Right.
This piece of blocking has to, I directed a play called Other Desert Cities, which is a great piece. And for me, it was about, within this family dynamic, about the alliances constantly shifting. So it was two people are here and one person's here and these two people are here. So the way I designed the set and the way I blocked it was always shifting. People were always moving from one corner to the next, almost like a boxing match.
Right.
Or a tag team wrestling kind of
right.
thing. Because to me, that was the story. If I didn't know what the story was, I wouldn't know how to do that.
The story informs everything
Yes,
you do.
everything.
And once you know the theme of it, whether it's film or anything else, you're going to be able to go, okay, you walk into any situation on a stage or in an empty set that you have to dress, and you go, well, I need it to do this, to do this, so that changes everything I thought, because...
Right. The first thing I did, well, you let me help on The Odd Couple. You let me do a little bit
right.
on that.
Oh, yeah.
And then the first play I did after that...
I forgot I did that show.
Was a play called The Real Inspector Hound, which is a Tom Stoppard, very absurd kind of piece. But for me, it was a piece about what is illusion and what is reality, and how in theater do those lines get blurred. So if that's the story I'm telling, there's two critics who are supposed to be watching this play. That's the plot.
Right.
But for me, I put the critics, not only did I put them on the stage, which most people do, it's kind of in the directions, but what I did was, in order to bust this one character through the two worlds, while I was giving the house speech, I had the one critic, who was Michael Wolff, bust in the entrance like he was late, and come in and come on stage, and my getting all flustered that this guy was busting in.
Right.
And for a while, the audience was very
unnerved.
They didn't know what the hell was going on, but that's exactly what the point was.
Right. So every set piece serves that theme.
Yeah. And the acting is the other thing.
Yeah, right.
Again, sometimes it's so simple, it becomes very elusive.
Right.
And I got this from the acting classes you taught. People are getting the impression that you taught me everything I know.
That's okay. You can believe that I taught them all everything.
Yeah. What do I want? How do I get it?
Yeah.
What do I want? How do I get it? This isn't working. Let me try something else. What do I want? And when I direct that and I see an actor floundering, this is exactly what I say. What do you want? How are you getting it? What do you want? How are you getting it?
Right. And it's really that, they call it acting right for a reason. It's it's a physical action.
it's an action.
Not the intellectual part was done by the writer.
Yeah,
and you
that's
just take
done.
care of the
Right.
business that
Yeah.
you got to take care of.
I will say as a director to actors all the time, and excuse me, you can edit this out.
Oh,
you know,
just keep it in.
I do not give a fuck about the words.
Right.
The writer wrote them. You have to memorize them. I'm the director. I care about what's going on underneath that.
Right, right.
You know,
So do you you enjoy all these things?
I
right?
love all of them.
What turns you on? If you had to say what's the fun? Come on, live performance.
Yeah,
That's pretty fun.
It's pretty fun.
It's pretty fun.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, and the directing comes close. The
Yeah.
directing comes really close, especially if you're sitting in the audience and you're feeling that they're getting it.
Sure.
You know, I love the writing because it's just such a, intellectual release, and
Right.
you could get your feelings and thoughts in the mouths of other
What is
characters.
that? Talk about what that's like, because I don't think writers often really get into that part of it. I've had that experience now that I've written things,
Yeah.
but there is something that happens where you wrote it, and again, my feeling on this, it came from somewhere else anyway, but you still have this
Right.
relationship with it till it gets out onto the page, and now some other human being
Yeah.
says it, and it comes out a totally different way, but it's truthful and it's brilliant. And
If
you're
it's
like,
if it's truthful and it's
let's assume it's truthful.
Yeah, we had this thing when we were doing a read for Lower Than the Angels.
Yes, right.
And I had this one line, and I knew the line was right, but it just never sounded right in my head.
Hmm.
It just never sounded right. It sounded phony. It sounded trite. And you got up to do the read, and and I was like, yeah, that's the way that I never heard it that way in my head.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you, in your head, writing it, were like, I don't know about this line.
But I knew it was right.
Right.
But it didn't sound right in my head.
Gotcha.
And when you said it, I never heard it that way in my head.
So what is that?
until the
What's
actor-
happening there?
Well, that was thrilling.
But what do you think is happening there when that other human just takes some? I think that's the essence of what artists do.
Yeah.
Is that something comes from somewhere else? We sort of channel it through this little prism and share it with other human beings in a way that they can see that mirror and reflect on it. But that's magic, isn't it?
It is magic. And here's the thing about it. I don't speak for all playwrights, and I'm not saying not all of them would do this, but I'm sure there are writers who would block that magic by deciding that it has to only be said one way.
David Mamet.
Yes. Well, but Mamet is brilliant,
I'm
but
busting his balls,
but the thing is, you have to allow that. Even as a playwright, and like I said, they have more power, but a playwright still has to give it up.
Yes.
Nobody owns a piece of theater.
No.
The playwright owns it for a while. I tell this to my actors all the time, and you said this. Then the director and the actors take it for a while, and they take it to us, and then it becomes about the audience and the actor, and they take it where it's going to. So you have to allow that to happen.
Right.
If you don't want that collaboration, if you don't want anybody to touch your art, then become a painter or a sculptor.
Or a novelist.
Or a novelist. And don't sell your novel to the movies.
No, read it to yourself.
Yeah, or write a poem. But
Right.
even that,
Right.
the person reading the poem is going to
Of
make a
course.
decision as to what.
Once you introduce, the whole
Yes.
point is if you're going to share the art,
Yes.
there's an audience that's receiving it, and they will ingest it
Yes.
and turn it
I mean,
into it.
I look at the Pietà as a Catholic and see something completely different from somebody who
Right.
comes from a different background. Now, is a universality to the Pietà. It's certainly about a mother and the ultimate pain of seeing
Sure.
a child die. And it's the fact that he did it in stone is just
Right.
amazing. But everybody's going to take away a different experience from looking at that.
Sure.
And,
Exactly.
he left it there for that reason. Okay, now everybody look at it and decide what you're getting from
Right.
it. And that's the ultimate.
Right. Are there, we talked about Williams and O'Neill and some of your early things that you loved. Are there special writers that, either playwrights or any writers, that you have read and enjoyed that are your go-to? Like, I love this guy's stuff, I love this woman's stuff, but this lights my fire more than anything else? Who is it?
Okay. So I would have to say, and although I haven't read a whole lot of fiction lately, I'm very heavy into historical biographies right now. But I read John Steinbeck's East of Eden 4 times.
4 times? Yeah. Okay.
I love John Steinbeck. I really do.
Interesting. Why?
Well, you know, there's a real earthiness to everything.
This is a theme that comes up for you a lot in your stuff. Is this carnality
there's
in touch with that?
In earthiness. I mean, when he talks about the Salinas Valley in California, and that, you know, you could almost feel the dirt, and you know, and of course in East of Eden, you're dealing with 4 generations, and this constant playing through of the Cain and Abel sibling rivalry myth, and there's this unbelievably fascinating character of Kathy, who's, you know, a real sociopath and a woman, which kind of makes me feel good. Very powerful woman, written very powerfully. So yeah, I do really love Steinbeck, I have to say.
Do you find, I mean, other than the earthiness, does any of this stuff flow into your sensibility when you act, work, write? Like, or are you just a fan of that?
Yeah,
it's not a style.
I'm not really conscious of that happening. Right. I mean, I think it does. I think everything an artist, whether it be an actor, everything they experience artistically is somehow infusing their, you know, what they do. So Steinbeck, I think the familial thing, and how, you know, especially in East of Eden, how, you know, the dynamic of the family. Yeah, I think that always, if I'm playing a family situation, I'm very conscious of what the dynamic is.
And I know you were a big fan of Long Day's Journey for that kind of, you know, all the O'Neill stuff where it's that deep dysfunction.
But you know what? It's funny with me and O'Neill, and people look at me like I'm crazy. I don't get depressed from O'Neill. I don't. I find it very cathartic. Long Days, when I'm really, really, really depressed, I read The Iceman Cometh, and it makes me feel better.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's weird.
That is weird.
Yeah.
Pipe dreams.
yeah, on the face of it. But for me, and again, I'm sure there are scholars who would argue, for me, it's the idea that what I come away with it is that the absence of hope is the problem.
Right.
You know, I mean, those guys, we look at them and they look, you know, like the very dregs of society, but they're fine until he takes away their hope.
Right.
They're fine. I mean, tomorrow's going to be better.
Right.
You know, do we all have... Yeah, we do.
Of course.
Can we live without hope? I don't know that we can.
No.
I think if this thing taught us anything...
It's pandemic, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Are there themes that you want to explore? Now, we'll talk about a little bit before we wrap up about what you're doing now and things you're writing now, things you want to do. But are there themes that you find yourself coming back to, or things you want to talk about that you haven't, or things like that, stories you want to tell, theme-wise, thematically?
Theme-wise,
like there's like the absence of hope, or there's no place like home, or the carnal and the divine, and all those themes we talked about.
What happens to me, and I guess this is because maybe I haven't done it enough for it to be that, you know, in my forebrain. I know this sounds crazy, but after I'm writing for a while, it's almost like I'm just taking down dictation.
It's crazy.
It's almost like 2 people are talking, and I've written things where I'll go, who said that? You know, it's like it's not even coming out of me. Now, it is, of course, but so thematically, I think what happens unconsciously, because I'm thinking to other people, thematically, these things just start popping up.
Sure.
So...
Do you think it's stuff that's in your orbit in your life? That
I think
floats
a couple of things that have come up a lot are the idea of marital communication and miscommunication, or communication between a man and a woman.
Right.
Miscommunication, missed opportunities, if only I had known this, if only you had told me that, if only I knew how you felt. You know, I think that's recurs.
Yes.
I think it's in Lower Than the Angels to some degree.
Absolutely is.
You know, it's definitely in Trinity, which is about a woman who's just been recently widowed, and her 3 men in her life, one of whom is dead, who shows up. And it's definitely in Trinity, and it's definitely in this new piece, especially in the first smallest one.
So what's the new piece? These are one-act plays that you were...
This is started with a very short 8-page piece that I was working on a play with a Long Island actress, Sherry Mandry, and she's been pestering me to go back to writing since she's seen some of the stuff we did readings.
Sure.
When are you going to write again? When are you going to write? And just to kind of get rid of her, I said, she said, write something short, because there were a lot of these festivals.
This is another theme in your life, by the way. You pretty much don't do anything until somebody just beats you down, threatens you.
I always said I would have been a great newspaper reporter because I work great under deadline, you know. But give me an open period of time and nothing happens. So just to get her off my back, I said, all right. So we thought about doing it in the city and festivals, and I know they don't provide anything for you, and I wasn't about to start lugging a whole bunch of stuff into Manhattan. So I said, okay, what can I do? Every theater has to have a couple of chairs or a bench. Okay, so I'm going to put 2 people on a bench or 2 chairs. What am I going to do with these people? So I decided, all right, I'm going to put them in a museum, and the picture's going to be in the audience. They're going to be looking
at the audience.
Right.
Picture, we can't see it.
You can't see it.
But they're looking at a piece
They're
of
looking
art.
at a picture. And through that art, their relationships are explored and discovered.
Right.
For me, the piece has now become about the connectivity of art.
Right.
How art connects us.
Right.
How important it is, especially in these days, that we continue, everybody, to make art, because it may be the only way left we have to begin to reconnect.
Right.
There's too much noise. There's too much yelling. There's too much anger. But if 2 people are looking at a painting, they can put that all behind them.
It's a great premise, because you have your 2 actors looking at something the audience can't see. Right. They're describing it. They're never telling you what it is.
Never.
And their whole relationship is reflected in this artist's work, whatever. And in the end, I think you use artists, right?
They're all real paintings. I'm looking at the painting as I'm writing the script.
I got you. Okay. So we never see it.
You never see it. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it as the different characters are seeing it. And then at the end, that picture's going to get flashed on the background.
Right.
So everybody gets to see it.
And then the audience now connects to whatever they connect. That's a brilliant premise.
Yeah. So the first 2 people are a husband and wife who have, been estranged and then have come to terms with each other. I'm not going to say more because it's kind of a twist. The second piece, which is called Rubenesque, I have a painting for that era. In fact, it took me a while to find. I mean, I couldn't even find a Rubens or Titian where the woman was fat enough. Believe it or not, I know fat is not politically correct,
you can use
but
fat
I can use fat. And it's about a plus-size woman, who meets the gentleman from the first play, the older man, and they're discussing this painting.
Right.
The third piece,
chiaroscuro, right?
Chiaroscuro.
Yeah.
Is about the woman from the first piece who's just beginning to feel the effects of Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And she has a scene with the guard, who's,
right.
And that painting is a Rembrandt, the Parable of the Rich Man.
Right.
Then I've started the second act. I actually have a second act, which is going to be the 2 younger characters.
Right.
And that's a still life that I'm using a still life for a particular reason. And the last piece is going to be all 4 of them. And it's the only really most famous painting in the whole play, because I deliberately used paintings that weren't necessarily famous. The last piece is going to be The Potato Eaters by Van Gogh.
All right.
Yeah.
It's I love the idea. It's because I love sparse theater.
Yes, and this is sparse,
particularly because I'm just lazy as fuck. So
that's how I thought.
No set, a light bulb, and I'm.
How do I do this where I don't have to get a U-Haul to go into Manhattan? Because I know these places, these festivals, they don't give you anything.
Right.
And it was going to be 8 minutes. So I said, all right, but 2 people on a chair. Well, what I figure they doing? Well, they're looking at a piece of art. And then it just, everything exploded when I said that to myself.
Yeah.
And I'm just thrilled with this one. I really am.
Great. So right before we finish, I just want to get into one last thing I didn't ask, which was, you said they dictate to you, right?
Yeah.
Is there a time of day? Like, how do you physically do, like, for people who are writers or want to be writers, is there, it's a very personal thing. So is there a room?
Very personal. Well, I do it at the computer in the den.
Okay, so you have a little spot that's yours.
I try and do it when Jeff's not in the den watching detective shows about husbands who murdered their wives. She's always watching for some reason.
That's odd.
So I'm on film now. If I show up dead,
we're digging up the yard.
Please just. It's him.
Okay. All right.
Don't take any excuses. But so I try and do it when he's not in the room. I even sometimes when he's quiet and he's just reading, I something about somebody being in the room while I'm doing this. It's a solitary thing for me. So I try and do it when he's not in, and it's very sporadic. I am not disciplined.
So you the screen comes up, fade in or curtain up, and a couple of words come out. You get up, walk around.
No, you
just keep going.
It keeps going.
The stream of consciousness.
And the first thing I'll do is I'll say, oh, what is the person going to say? And I'll just go, well, let him say anything. It doesn't matter. Just say something. And I'll go, hi. Well, how are you? Well, I mean, it's just that stupid in the beginning.
Just to get you the action of...
Just me getting. And then it comes to a point where I just, stop and I go away. And about the next morning, and I'm happy. And then the next morning I get up and go, that was the worst shit anybody's ever written. I just wasted. So I let it sit for a few days.
Right.
And then I go back. It's not that bad. It's not as awful as I thought. So
it's like you're having this relationship with the creation of yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're getting along with each other.
Yeah.
What I want to get into a little bit to finish up is, because you are a director and because you part of what I've discovered directing is, and it's not always this way, but sometimes there's some teaching element that you bring to it, and there's some mentoring element that you're. It's people management, and you're constantly managing personalities and all that stuff. So as an actor, as a director, as a writer, as an artist, for that person out in the audience who might be listening who is starting off on that journey, or maybe is in one discipline and is going to go to another one of those disciplines, what's your advice, sort of a general artistic mentoring advice to the performing artist, either the writer, the actor, what should they pay attention to always?
I think in all three, across the board, there's a few little specifics, but across the board, I think as an actor, if you have a really strong sense of what the story is when you go in to do a piece and how you fit into it, I think you'll very easily slip into the directing idea, because you'll just have the broader view of the story, not just from one character's idea, but from the whole. And as a writer, I've seen a lot of pieces. A lot of people are doing a lot of Zoom things, and I've seen, and I don't watch a lot of it because Zoom doesn't do it for me. But what I see a lack of, even in writers, is what's the story? What are you trying to say? And what's the story? There's no story. There's a plot. There's a bunch of people talking, but it doesn't seem to be headed anywhere. So for me, if you have a clear sense of story in either of the three disciplines, there are some specific minutiae that you're going to have to wane your way through. But if you have that going in as a foundation, you will be able to make the smoothest transition from one to the next. Now, as a director, what you have to understand is, if you've been acting, and of course, as a director, you may have certain things in your head of how you would do it. You have to let go of that. You have to let the actor be the actor. So the impulse to say, no, you're not doing it exactly. No, let them do it the way they see it, unless it
takes it off the story.
Off the story.
That's the only barometer.
That's the only barometer. Right. That's a muscle you have to learn to do.
Right.
You have to learn as a director, as you said many years ago, you have to learn. It's an art of how to hit every actor.
Yeah, right.
Some
It's
actors
like
you
playing,
have
like
to
playing billiards.
Yeah, some actors you have to hit through another actor. Some actors you can hit straight on. You always used to say paints and crayons. You don't use blue the way you use red. You don't use pastels the way you use oil.
Right.
And you have to determine what every actor is and how to hit them
Right.
as a director. You know, the writer, again, as long as your story is being served, once the directors and the actors get a hold of it, or once the director in a movie gets a hold of it, you have to be able to let go of it, except if the story isn't being served.
Right.
That would be the only time. You can go home and scream and yell and say, I can't stand this, I don't like what he's doing. You can do all of that.
Right.
But as long as the story is being served, the art is being preserved.
Right.
So you can make that transition for me, I think, I made the transition because I always had a clear sense of that.
There's it's such a really cool theme that's emerging now in a lot of these conversations, and I love it because it's where I come from deep down, is this idea of letting go.
Yeah.
That life in general is all about letting go.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. The more you hang on to it, the worse it's going to be.
And I think, I actually think, and this is a reason why I think, and you know, I don't want to get onto any kind of political or feminist bent, but I honestly think that's why, you know, we need to see more women in this, and I think being a mother
Sure.
of adult children, if you know, I mean, that's the letting go.
Absolutely.
Everything else after that is pretty easy.
Right.
I mean, there comes a point when you're raising kids, no matter what they're doing, you have to say, this is like the worst thing they could do, but you know what? They're grown up, they have to make their own mistakes.
Right.
And it's hard. It's very, very hard. But if you can do that, you know,
You can do it to your show.
If you can do it to your show. And I think it's the same thing for, you know, parents in general. It's a letting go. But even everybody has to let go. Everybody has to let go of parents eventually.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, I mean, letting go is a part of life.
And here's the thing, and I spoke to my buddy Vinny on a podcast about this. I've spoken about this, and it's come up now, and I have to address it because it's come out 3 times. There is the other side of that part of it is there is a real gift that comes back to you when you do that.
Yeah.
It's not just some sort of sacrifice and
Oh,
I
no.
have to learn how to accept and let go and let my... No, understand that when you do it, you get back something of value that you never would have achieved if you'd tried to hang on, you know?
Yeah. No, because especially in this art, which is so collaborative.
Yes.
You know, if you don't let go, it's not really good theater. It's not a good movie. It's not a good, you know, it's not a good play. It's not a good production.
The audience resents you.
And the audience resents you.
If you do
the
that.
The thing that bothers me most is when I see, you know, a director or somebody get on stage before the show begins and tells me what the play is about.
Right.
Excuse me, I paid my money. I get to decide what it's about.
Right.
If you buy my ticket, maybe. And it just annoys me because, first of all, I think it's insulting that you don't think I can make the right decision. And second of all, who are you to tell me what it's about? Right. You don't own it any more than anybody else does.
That's right.
Once there's an audience in that theater, they own it as much as anybody else. It's a circle, and they complete the circle.
And finally, live theater, what's that? Tell, because when we get out of this, when we get out of this mess, especially where we are in New York and on Long Island here in particular, there'll be places opening back up. Hopefully audiences, you know, in 4 or 5, 6 months, I don't know, we'll have a sense of normalcy again. For those people who don't understand what live theater is, or they think of it only as The Lion King on Broadway or something, but have never seen, you know, Long Day's Journey or whatever, the energy of that. Give us a primer. What is that, for that audience who doesn't understand it, what is live theater as compared to the films or whatever?
Again, it's very hard to define unless you've sat there for the first time. And my point is, if you've never done it and you're 70, do it now because what you get is going to change your life. There is an exchange of energy that when you walk out, if it's good, if it's honest, if it's true, and again, There's a lot that isn't.
That's fine.
You know, there's a lot. But on those occasions when it happens that way, and it's honest and it's true, you will walk out of that theater and you will be different. You will have changed. Your molecules will be bouncing off each other in a different way,
right.
because the energy that's taken in has changed the way those
right.
molecules start bouncing off each
it's
other.
in the same room with those people having that experience.
Yes, and that's why we have to keep it, because there's no other experience that does that. We have 12 screens. Everybody's, 12 screens are competing for everybody's attention. But there's always a screen between you and this is the only place where that doesn't happen. The energy is flowing freely,
right.
and it's there. And I can remember on those great productions like Long Day's Journey with Vanessa Redgrave and Dennehy and Sean Leonard and
what's his name? The kid who died.
Yeah. There was a point I remember watching that, and it was 4.5 hours, and the thing flew.
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Hoffman. There was a point, and it was a Tuesday night. We went to, so you had really rabid theater goers, and on Tuesday. There was a point I can remember almost wanting to put my head down and not look, because it was so personal, it was so real, and it was so honest that I felt like I was eavesdropping.
Wow. That's when it's the best.
Yeah.
That's when humans are, and then we need that. We need that for our soul.
And we need it on an emotional level.
Yeah.
We need to feel that pain, that joy, that, we need to learn. I learned about what it was like for a black family to experience segregation when I went to see the movie A Raisin in the Sun. Because I never understood that. I lived in a blue-collar white neighborhood. Right. I didn't understand what the hell was going on, that black people weren't allowed to buy.
Right.
I went to see that movie. My whole perspective changed.
Right.
I suddenly saw people in a completely different way. That's the power of the theater.
Right. That's it. And that's what we have to keep doing. So,
yes.
So you keep writing.
I will.
At some point, I'll get back and do something else, and we'll get together and keep putting art out there.
I would love to.
And I'm definitely going to have you. We have so much more to stuff. You'll be another guest on it. You'll be a regular on here.
I would love to. I would love to.
So this was a blast.
This was great. I love this.
Thank you so much, honey.
Anybody who lets me talk for 2 hours.
All right.
Or an hour, or whatever.
Whatever we do.
Yeah,
it
great.
flew by, and we could do it again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything.
Thanks, honey.
Thank you.